Men from Manitoba take a break from training at one of the largest bases in Canada in the summer of 1916. Soon they will be on their way to the Western Front. They're now long gone, along with most of the traces of their city under canvas. My name is Marc George. After 25 years in the Canadian Army as an artillery officer, I retired and became the director of the National Artillery Museum at Canadian Forces Base Charlotte. As a soldier, my principal interest in history is the First World War and its effects on Canada. As an Army officer, my most important function was to ensure that the soldiers under my command were trained for war. As a result, I'm very interested in how well soldiers were trained during the Great War. I'm going to work with archaeologists, use 3D graphics, consult the historic record, and do some hands-on reconstructions to try to bring the training of Canadian soldiers in the Great War back to life, to resurrect the ghost camps on their warpaths. I'm on my way to Camp Hughes National Heritage Site in Manitoba. In 1916, this was the second largest training camp in Canada, with almost 30,000 soldiers working and training here. Men from all 4 Western provinces trained at Hughes, including almost everyone who signed up in Saskatchewan and Manitoba in 1915 and 1916. 200 of the first 264 people to enlist from my home area of Boisvane and Morton trained here. Today, aside from abandoned trenches, an old swimming pool, some ruins, and the graves of sick soldiers, there's not much left of the camp, at least not above ground level. The museum has partnered with Brandon University Archaeology and Canadian Forces Base Charlotte to investigate Camp Hughes. The Archaeology Field School, under the direction of Professor Sioko Tsukamoto, is setting up camp today with the help of some of the soldiers from the base. Sioko and her team will be on site for a month for archaeology, and she will also direct a survey team in the trench system. We will be building upon the previous great work done by the Military History Society of Manitoba and adding to the body of knowledge about the site. Not every Canadian who enlisted in the Great War served in combat, but all did their time in training camps. Some were staff, while others were learning the skills to help them survive trench warfare. I want to connect with that camp life and find out just how well the men were prepared for war on the Western Front. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a tour of Camp Hughes before we get engaged in all the archaeology. And I just want to give you guys a sense of the significance of the site, and also we'll do a trench tour. So that's City of Brandon right there, right? We came out Trans-Canada, drove down the road, and we are actually right there where the road ends in this little section of land, which is owned by the Department of National Defense, and which is part of the Camp Hughes National Heritage Site. The site was called Camp Sewell until it was renamed in honor of Sir Sam Hughes in 1915. What is left includes 2 sets of surviving training trenches, one from 1915 and one larger set from 1916. There is also the remains of a very large rifle range built in 1915. Further north are the areas where tens of thousands of men lived under canvas from May until October or November each year. Their tent lines surrounded the built-up area of the camp, with permanent buildings for the hospital, camp headquarters, post office, and other administrative units. And at the heart of it all was the Midway, a swimming pool, 6 movie theaters, including the first multiplex in Canada, shops and restaurants to keep the temporary residents of the second largest city in Manitoba entertained. In 1915 and 16, battalions of around 1,000 men were recruited and concentrated here for training from May until late fall. This was where they would fire their rifles and throw grenades for the first time. Once their battalion was judged ready, it was sent to England for more training and to wait to reinforce the Canadian Corps at the front. After 1916, the system changed to recruiting small groups of men and sending them to England more quickly, so the training at Camp Hughes stopped. In spite of the available records, there is much that we do not know about life at Camp Hughes. Hopefully, the archaeology will help fill in some of the gaps in our knowledge.
The trick will be trying to sort of separate, World War I debris from occupations onwards. So you will find a lot of, rusted cans and broken glass, but that could be temporaneous garbage.
Sioko and I have walked the site thoroughly and have decided where to dig in consultation with the provincial archaeologist of Manitoba. We will be looking at a Manitoba Battalion campsite, as well as an area where artifacts have been exposed by recent non-human activity.
So there is actually a feature along here where we think a gopher has actually dug up a refuse pit because there's a lot of burnt bone, and it's domestic bone, so it's chicken bone, and burnt plates. So that could be from an encampment there. So we'll put a unit over that.
Picture of the camp. I tour the team around the site. Although we will not be digging in the trench system, I explain it to them so they will understand the training that was conducted here, and also so that they will have an insight into the horror of the Western Front that these men were destined to face. The size and accessibility of the trench system at Camp Hughes is very unique. If you look, the ground looks uneven and disturbed sort of at the foot of that hill. That's the Allied frontline system. So of course there was no fighting that went on here, but this is one of the best places in the world to interpret the First World War. Now, for most of the First World War, the trench system does not move at all as far as it is from here to Brandon. So in that space, from 1914 to 1918, about 10.5 million men are killed or wounded. And the trench system just essentially makes these small nudges back and forth for the whole time. The Great War was a brutal conflict. It began with most armies still having concepts of warfare more suited to the Napoleonic era than modern times. By 1914, modern technology had made firepower on a previously unimaginable scale available to all sides. The result is a massive slaughter of soldiers until tactics can be devised to deal with the new reality. In an effort to protect themselves, the armies of Europe dig trenches. The war devolves to a stalemate with increasingly strong defensive positions defying all attempts at a decisive victory. It is not until the last 2 years of the war that tactical innovations restore sufficient mobility to the battlefield to allow the Allies to succeed in the face of German barbed wire and guns. The German frontline trench, you can see the pin flags, the post, and that line across the bottom of that hill. That's the German front line. This is the average width of no man's land on the Western Front. Fred Rodwell from my hometown signed up in Brandon and arrived at Camp Hughes in July of 1915. He was wounded 3 times and was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal and the Military Medal for Valor. His citation for the Distinguished Conduct Medal leaves a vivid impression of the ferocity of the fighting on the Western Front, noting that he single-handedly killed 30 Germans with hand grenades during a trench raid. His nephew once told me that Fred had also wielded a shovel as a weapon during the operation. So he was in the thick of the fighting, leading the way through a trench system just like this, throwing hand grenades, and the soldiers used to cut the shovels off, so it was about a 3-foot swing, and sharpen both edges like a blade, so you could swing it like an axe. And that was the act which won him the Distinguished Conduct Medal, which is second only to the Victoria Cross in terms of valor. Fred survived the war as one of the 2 most highly decorated soldiers from Boissevain and Morton, both of whom unveiled the municipal cenotaph in July of 1924. He lied about his age and signed up again in World War II, serving in Shiloh, training new soldiers. Fred passed away in Boissevain in 1971. He's one of many soldiers from my hometown that I wish I had known better. From archival records, I know where one Manitoba battalion camped in 1915, so Sioko and the team get started in the 44th Battalion tent lines the day after the tour.
We'll try a couple of different strategies out here. One is just random walking. There doesn't have to be any sort of organization to it. Another is where it's systematic and we're all like spaced out and then we just walk in a line. We can try that after and see what capture, if anything, we've missed.
The field walking is followed by sweeps with a very sensitive metal detector. It doesn't take long before glimpses of life at the camp start to be revealed. The location of each item is carefully recorded to allow us to build up a comprehensive picture of the site.
Wait. Oh, really, yeah?
I'm so relieved that there are surface artifacts being found. Camp Hughes has been plundered by treasure hunters for decades, even though removing artifacts from the site has been illegal since the 70s. Finding things on the surface gives me hope that there will still be buried items that will help us reconstruct life at the camp. It is heartening to know that the entire heritage of the site has not been robbed by collectors and people just wanting to make a few dollars by selling what they dig up.
But you got a cup.
Yeah. See? Isn't it cool? And it's like a magic. You're just like, where are you guys finding
this never happens, you know, like this.
The field school is definitely off to a good start for their month on the site.
We'll put a test pit over this.
Okay.
All right, and it'll be Alana's test pit.
I'm gonna take a picture of it for posterity.
Yeah.
It's 4 to 6 inches.
This is the 1907 pattern sword bayonet. It is a 17-inch tapered steel blade, which basically turns the Lee Enfield rifle into a spear. Soldiers were taught bayonet drills about 2.5 hours a week during the Great War. They were taught to advance with the rifles held at the high port because that was the quickest way to adopt the on-guard position for bayonet fighting. It's a much more awkward position to use to bring the weapon up to fire. Modern armies advance with the rifle in the ready position like this so that they can quickly shoot at opponents. So the fact that soldiers throughout the Great War were taught to advance at the high port shows that this is an outdated concept which does persist throughout the entire conflict. So the first position the soldiers were taught to adopt is the on-guard position, like this, with the bayonet pointed at your opponent's throat. The throat was the principal target area. If you couldn't go for the throat, they were taught to stab for the abdomen or the thighs because there's not much obstruction there for the blade. It was also acceptable to stab for the chest and head. However, bone can deflect this blade from making a proper penetration, and stabbing someone in the ribs gives a very high risk that as they crumple around the blade's going to become lodged irretrievably in their chest. The soldiers were told to stab with only the first 4 to 6 inches of the bayonet. To go any deeper than that meant that there would be so much muscle tissue gripping the blade, it would be almost impossible to pull it out. If they had what was referred to as a hard extraction, they were trained to twist the bayonet to try and break the suction of the muscles around it, and failing that, they were told to fire around at their enemy at this 12-inch range. That should clear a cavity over top of the bayonet and allow it to be extracted. Now, of course, most soldiers, if they had ammunition, preferred to shoot their enemies at close range before they actually had to get within 5 feet and try to stab them. So the bayonet is rarely used on the battlefield. It only inflicts about 1% of total casualties in the Great War. So from the first position, which is the on-guard position, the first thing the soldiers were taught to do was the long thrust, which is intended for enemies at a 5-foot distance. So you're thrusting for their throat. If they're closer than that, the hand was slid up underneath the bayonet and the 3-foot thrust is made. For extreme close quarters, both hands come up underneath the bayonet and we make the jab, which is intended to be into an opponent's chin, stabbing up into their head. The butt of the rifle could also be used offensively, and these were called butt strokes. The first 3 were intended to use as a combination. Butt stroke 1 is like this, toward the enemy's chest and head. If that backs him up, the next butt stroke is like this, toward the enemy's face. The third butt stroke, which would follow up that if they're still too close to you, is the slash. And so you would bring the bayonet down like this, either cutting your opponent or forcing him back another couple of feet. That should leave him back on point and then vulnerable to the jab. The last thing that the soldiers were taught was the parry. It was important, if you were trying to deflect a blow from your opponent, that you did not leave yourself in a position like this, out of balance and really unable to respond. So they were taught to parry by keeping their hand in a position for a subsequent thrust, and a blade coming at them from the left is parried like this, a blade coming at them from the right is parried like this. This was intended to be used in combination with the thrust. So my opponent approaches me, I parry, and I thrust back. He approaches from this side, I parry, and I thrust back. The bayonet, as I said, was rarely used in this capacity, although the men spent a lot of time training for it. It was most often used by Canadians for cooking food. It's a nice long blade so you could stay back from the flame. And it was frequently just stabbed into the walls of dugouts and trench systems so you could hang your kit on it, but still keep it dry and off the ground. The Canadian slang for a bayonet during the First World War is a toasting fork. I'm on the bayonet fighting range at Canadian Forces Base Charlotte to try First World War techniques on modern targets. Although it is seen as a weapon of last resort, soldiers are still trained to fight with the bayonet. The penetrating power of the sword bayonet proves to be quite fearsome. Ironically, one of the problems with the bayonet was the position that it was carried in. It's a highly reflective large blade, and there are numerous German accounts which state that the reason they saw where the Canadians or British soldiers were advancing from is because they could see the sunlight glinting off of hundreds of bayonets that were held at the high port. The soldiers are in well camouflaged khaki uniforms, but they're holding up a 17-inch piece of polished steel for the enemy to see. After a few days, I'm back on site to see the progress Sioko and her team have made.
What we've done is actually we're sort of standing on one right now.
Yeah.
You'll see sort of this circular kind of vegetation patch.
Right.
So what we had done is we had put pin flags around everything.
Yeah.
And we're mapping all the points. We're pacing out around these changes in vegetation.
So basically,
So,
we think the vegetation has changed where there was a bell tent.
yeah.
I like Sioko's idea to survey in all the changes in vegetation that indicate the locations where the tents stood. The map should give us a good idea of the layout of the 44th Battalion lines. The soldiers at Hughes lived in white bell tents, with about 8 men per tent for private soldiers. Once the weather got colder, they were issued with small oil heaters. You'd have about 100 bell tents for the privates, about 30 tents for the senior NCOs and officers, which would be in a separate area, and then, you know, the majors and the colonel would have their own tent, as would the RSM. So you know, another. We're really looking at somewhere between 130 and 150 bell tents.
And so then the orange pin flags that are out here are marking the surface spot, the field walking exercise that we did. And then the pink are the metal detector hits.
Okay. Among the finds so far are some unfired blank rounds. We have procedures in place with Canadian Forces Base Charlotte to have ammunition technicians tell us what is safe to collect. The blanks are okay for us to pick up. Anything dangerous will be destroyed by personnel from Charlotte. The possibility of encountering dud ammunition on old military training sites is another very good reason not to be out randomly digging for treasure.
You can see the crimped end on that.
It's an unfired
Yep.
303 blank cartridge.
Yep. That says 1910.
Yeah, it looks like World War I. So it's a Mark 6. Mark 6 blank.
Yeah, that's a 10 on that one.
Sioko's team is excavating metal detector hits and then opening up larger archaeological units if non-metal artifacts are also found. I'm excited to see the units going in.
And this is our quadrant.
Yeah.
And we'll take this back. And if there's more, if there's a concentration of artifacts, then we can decide which direction we want to go. So, and of course there is a metal detector hit here.
Yeah.
And there.
So this could actually be a pretty good unit.
This could be.
I'm truly amazed by the number of metal detector hits. It's a bit overwhelming to think of all the things waiting under our feet to help us tell the story of the people who served here. It is certainly more than we can deal with in one season. We will survey and map every hit in, and hopefully They will all still be here for future investigations. I mean, there's years of useful work that can be done here as long as people leave it alone. So, good. Okay, that's fantastic. Sioko tells me there are several interesting artifacts back in the tent for me to see.
I'm wondering if someone had done a little bit of
Possibly, yeah.
digging
And
and left it.
that's a mess tin, right? So there's a lid with a little handle, and that was used for eating. So each soldier's issued
There's their
part of the handle.
Yeah, yeah.
The other side's missing. But that was essentially the bowl for the soldier. Each soldier got a mess tin. So that's for sure World War I. And someone in the 44th Battalion, I'm sure, missed that. As I'm sure they missed their spoon, which is you know, the most useful of all utensils, because it can do pretty much everything that a fork and knife can do as well. So most soldiers, you know, at the very least, made sure that they kept a spoon on them.
And then we found this.
This is really neat.
Yeah, this here we found yesterday with a metal detector hit. And it's this little,
it's out of the
no, we
bag,
can just
okay.
pull it out here. It's just a little heart-shaped piece of metal with the pinchers on either side.
Yeah.
So I think that would be, you'd bend it and put it into the fabric, would be my guess.
Yeah. So, and someone, it looks like, I wonder, I mean, it's possible those were available, you know, in one of the little shops at the camp, or someone's made that, maybe.
Well, you know, they had a lot of special days where they sell buttons
Yeah.
and ribbons and things like that. So I don't know if this was part of a special day where they would sell those as a fundraiser, like they would do the Red Cross pins and the ribbons for supporting, you know, the French orphans and the Belgian orphans and things like that. And then we're finding paper.
Paper is great.
Yeah. So this has the writing on it. Again, we want to sort of, we've just kept it with the soil and we're wrapped in. We'll take it back to the lab to look, but we're leaning more towards newsprint because there is a bit of a line which looks like a column divider that they would have for the paper, and there.
We are finding numerous blank rifle cartridges which date from World War I. This gives me a good insight into some of the training that the men experienced here. But at least, I mean, there's lots of cartridges, so it's interesting to know that they used lots of blank ammunition in their training here. And the ones that you found in no man's land, you know, are evidence that they were using it in the trench system when they were training. So that's more realistic.
And again, those were right on the surface too, after a rain.
Right.
So.
But it's interesting because that makes it much more realistic for the soldiers. So, you know, that means they had real rifles with blank ammunition. And in no man's land, unless they've been moved subsequently, that would indicate that they were firing, you know, and when they were practicing to assault German trenches, they actually were using blanks. So that's interesting. And it's the most realism you can introduce for the troops without actually using live ammo. Each battalion of men got only one exposure to the trench system as their first taste of what warfare was going to be like on the Western Front. I'm glad to know that it was as realistic as the instructors could make it by the use of blank ammunition. Now, I want to examine some of the other training that the men did at Camp Hughes. This is a Mills hand grenade called a Mills bomb by the troops. These were introduced in 1915, and they're one of the most effective grenade designs in history. It's a cast iron body. Inside, it was filled with high explosive in the outer cavities, and there's a hollow center section which includes a steel striker on a powerful spring and a space to insert a 4.5-second fuse and a detonator. To prime the grenade, this base plug was untwisted, the detonator assembly slid in, and then this was tightened back up. To throw the grenade, it was held with the base plug up because the base plug sits slightly higher in a properly primed grenade. So it's a visual check to make sure that this thing is ready to go. You grip the safety lever, which restrains that striker with 4 fingers, and you grip the safety pin, which restrains the safety lever. To throw the grenade, you pull the grenade away from the safety pin. Now, the reason you do that is that so you maintain a tight grip on the grenade. If you pull this way, there's a chance that what you're going to do is pull the grenade out of your hand and then have the pin come out. That's still going to set off the 4.5-second fuse, except the grenade's going to be at your feet, not flying toward the enemy. Now, inside the grenade, I'll show you what happens when the safety lever is released. So this is the striker. And at the bottom is a little nitroglycerin cap, which is going to ignite that 4.5 second fuse. So when I release the grenade and throw it, that striker comes down, sets the cap off, at which point this should be flying through the air toward the enemy. 4.5 seconds later, it detonates with a 30-yard lethal radius. It was intended that the soldier would spend about 3 hours a week doing grenade training, which is about the same as the amount of time invested in bayonet training. The payoff was far greater with grenades because they inflicted about 9% of the total casualties in the Great War. As a retired soldier, I'm no longer allowed on the grenade range, but I have arranged to get footage of soldiers taking modern infantry training throwing their first live grenades.
Let's go.
The soldier removes a safety clip and is now ready to pull the safety pin.
Whoa.
Throwing your first grenade is a pretty scary moment.
Grenade!
The detonation sends out a lethal spray of metal fragments. Grenades in World War I would have looked pretty much like this. Slowing down the footage shows the detonation more clearly. You can imagine the effect in an enclosed space like a trench. You have to be certain that soldiers know what they're doing before they throw a live grenade. Making sure that you or your comrades are not caught in the blast of your own grenade is critical and challenging on the battlefield. The archaeology is progressing well, but there are some questions that it cannot answer for me. I'm on the rifle range at Camp Hughes. There are two strange features with this range. One is it has a zigzag shape for the firing points from the 1 to the 400 meter. Most ranges just use a straight line. I'm really not sure why they built it with that strange shape in it. My theory is that it has something to do with safety and a visible way of dividing the range into a left and a right half so that people could be on one half and know that they can't go beyond the zigzag or they're stepping into danger from another point. The other mystery to me is there are two features like this. A souvenir hunter once told me that he found a sign that said 600 yards on this firing point. Now, again, it's unfortunate that it wasn't documented properly and that I didn't get a chance to see it. But taking him at his word, it does mean that this is directly related to the rifle range. Both of these strange firing points do have a clear line of sight to the target area. So I'm reasonably confident in saying that these are in fact related to the rifle range. The problem is they're so small. They're really only big enough for 5, maybe 10 firers, which isn't very practical. When you look at the huge width of this rifle range, almost a kilometer, which was meant to hold 500 men at a time, the idea of putting 10 people through their paces here with rifles seems pointless. I'm hoping that comparing this range to other surviving Canadian training areas from the Great War will help me answer my questions about the Camp Hughes rifle range.
Hello.
Sioko and her team continue the dig, and they're bringing up some fantastic artifacts. I will have to leave the team to their work while I go on a little trip. Archaeologists who are friends of mine have been studying Canadian training camps in England for many years. I have arranged to visit them. I really want to get a sense of how Camp Hughes compared to camps in England during the Great War, and also to see firsthand how much remains of the UK locations. I'm on the south coast of England to see two of the camps that our soldiers trained at after they shipped overseas and waited to go on to the front. They also waited here to be sent back to the front after recovering from wounds, and waited here again at war's end to be shipped home. Men from the 4 western provinces, Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick, were all in Seaford and Shoreham during the war. I think November 1917, it gives you the location of everything in the Canadian military. I start by meeting with Justin Russell, who's agreed to show me around the remains of Shoreham Camp. Yeah.
But the camp would have stretched all the way up this valley sides, all the way over that hill.
So we're sort of on the edge of
yes, we're right on the
area
edge.
number 5, basically.
Yeah.
Right, we'd be somewhere sort of here.
Somewhere, we're actually a bit further back.
So
we've
okay.
come up this road.
Okay.
And we're now very close to this reservoir, the old pumping station. So
I'm surprised at how little of Shoreham remains accessible. Most of the remains lie long buried, including every trace of the training trenches.
It's all been, they're all backfilled, and the lower slopes are used for agriculture, so they get regularly ploughed. And you can see chalky scars in aerial photographs,
Right.
but there is no visible sign in terms of mounds or earthworks.
Right. Justin takes me to see the first of 2 rifle ranges of which traces remain.
There's the 200-yard position, 300-yard position, 400, 500, 600 over here, and then 800 over here, and then 1,000 yards up here, which is somewhere along one of those tracks. So it's quite unusual in that they're staggered.
It looks to me like a machine gun range.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Well, it's not big enough for relays of soldiers.
Yeah.
And by this time, they're not training soldiers to fire beyond 300 yards. So, you know, from 1,000 yards, that's even tough with a Lewis gun. I mean, you know, so you may have a Vickers gun. Seeing the firing points on this range in England, I have a sudden realization that the mounds on the Camp Hughes rifle range look the same. I finally know what they were used for. They are Lewis gun firing points, used by the Lewis gun training section at Camp Hughes. The shape of the Hughes range was likely to allow Lewis gun and rifle training to be conducted at the same time. It's got a copper. Justin says he has a better preserved rifle range to show me. It is much smaller than the range at Camp Hughes, but it is also much more sophisticated. This is classically laid out as clearly a rifle range as opposed to those little firing points. So, yeah. So should we walk
Great,
back
let's go into the target area. It was used up until the 1980s,
Okay.
and then it was closed.
And here's the range hut.
Yep.
And the target mechanisms. So,
So these are known as Hythe target frames because of the I suppose their introduction at the Hythe ranges in Kent.
Yeah.
They're difficult things to date because this style has been in use since the late Victorian period.
Right. It is amazing that I used exactly the same target machines throughout my career in Canada. These allow much more advanced training to be conducted, as the targets can be made to pop up and the soldiers could learn how to shoot quickly at fleeting enemies. This is a definite advance over their introduction to firing in 2 range days at Camp Hughes. And in some practices, you were to indicate with a triangle where someone had hit.
Yes.
So you see the hole appear, and you hold the triangle on a stick. If you hear the round go over and it misses, you would wave it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's a great game to shoot. You know, you would get in trouble for it, but it was quite funny if you would shoot the pointer.
The stick.
Right. So, you know, the guy holds the stick up to indicate where, and you shoot again and try and hit the pointer because it scares them, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm sure, you know, I'm sure that went on here, and I'm sure there was lots of sergeants yelling for it to stop. This has been a fantastic day. I'm so glad I made the trip. It was worth it just to determine the purpose of the mounds and the zigzag shape on the Camp Hughes rifle range. It is clear that more advanced rifle training was given to the men once they arrived in England. It is sobering to realize how little remains of such a vast and important training camp. I'm off to visit Seaford camp tomorrow with Luke Barber. Justin and Luke have both told me there's more to see there, so I'm quite excited. Seaford was another major camp akin to Camp Hughes. It was one of the main Canadian training camps in England from 1916 to 1918. I cannot wait to see what Luke has to show me. Our first stop turns out to be the remains of a hillside camp that was once home to Manitoba soldiers.
It goes a long way over here,
Yeah.
but you can see we've got the huts,
Yeah.
but the tents
Right. There's
go
tons of them.
right
Yeah.
the way across,
Yeah.
right the way across. But this terrace here is
This hut. Right.
this hut here, and then you've got another one down from it,
Yeah.
which is that one.
Right.
And you can just see the start of the one
Yeah.
to that side. They're quite isolated. There are more huts down here which you can't really see very clearly.
I find it very moving to be on the same ground that so many men from Manitoba lived on during their wartime in England. Seaford had only half the number of men that Camp Hughes held, and also had approximately twice the training facilities, including trench systems. So our soldiers did get more training opportunities here. I reflect that Seaford would have been a big change for the men in other very significant ways. I have to say that, because the guys at Hughes are in bell tents the whole time, right up till November, which in Canada is starting to get pretty miserable. So, it must have been great, to come here, live in a wooden hut if they got to.
Yeah.
But also to have a real town here.
Oh,
not,
yeah, to have
just
the town facilities.
yeah.
And that's my view of one of the huts on the inside.
Right.
And with their stove in the middle, keeping their tea warm.
Luke tells me there are some trenches still accessible at Seaford that may date from the Great War. I can't wait to see them.
That is a classic, meandering communication trench. And the crenellated front line is pretty much as you'd expect it.
Yeah. There are anomalies in these trenches that may mean that they were dug later or possibly modified and reused during World War II to defend the southern coast of England against a German invasion. I'm struck by how small these trenches are in comparison to the ones at Camp Hughes, really only big enough for a platoon of 40 men as opposed to the 800 that could still fit in the trenches at Hughes. So the thing that amazes me here really is these are preserved about to the same degree as the trenches at Hughes. But in fact, if you look at the size of this base, 15,000 men, and really there are no trenches that we can confirm as being First World War left here.
Not extant.
Right. Luke now takes me off to see more of the remains, including the holy grail of archaeologists, the camp garbage dump. He warns me the dump is not easy to get to, and I note that he has put on a heavy coat and keeps mentioning brambles.
Sorry, in here. It's like going into Tutankhamun's tomb at first.
Yes.
You see, the quantity is just
staggering.
colossal.
Yeah.
You got that's a paste pot, so toothpaste or hair cream, something like that. Especially, they had a number of different commodities in those.
Right.
Well, an ink, little dwarf ink. So for writing your letters or postcards home, they'll be available in large quantities.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice because normally you don't find the complete ones. They've normally been dug away already.
It is sad to see that Seaford has been plundered by treasure hunters just like Camp Hughes. Anything unwanted has been cast aside and in many cases broken in the process. But there are still artifacts to be found. Luke wants to show me some of the items he's recovered. It is powerful to hold the personal items that would have been so important to these men so far from home. I also make a Canadian gunner connection. Oh wow.
That's better.
Field artillery. There you go. So a gunner. W.W. Watling, Canadian Field Artillery. Gunner Burville Wesley Watling from Chatham, New Brunswick, probably threw this identity disc away because his first initial was engraved incorrectly. He signed up in 1916 and returned home to his wife and 2 small daughters in 1919. Sadly, he passed away unexpectedly in 1921. It gives me a chill to connect with a member of my own regiment across all this time. Luke has also done a great deal of research into a much more advanced part of the training for the Canadians at Seaford, the rifle grenade range. Rifle grenades were not fired at Camp Hughes because the Ross rifles used there were not well suited to firing them.
The principle of these is all pretty similar. Where being, this again goes down the barrel
Yeah.
of the rifle, a blank cartridge again to fire it off. This one's got the transit plug-in,
Yep.
which of course
There you
we
are.
found plenty of those, and these basically get obviously undone at the firing position. Often these get chucked away or lost. Then they'll put the detonator in.
Yeah.
It's the dangerous bit, and once that's in, then it starts getting a bit more serious.
Right.
So this is what goes flying off down the slope. It goes off. These are the body fragments that fly all over the place, which match.
Right.
Not that one.
no,
It's that one.
that one.
That's
Right.
one of these ones,
There we go. Right.
which match that.
Again, I'm seeing clear evidence that training was more advanced in England and built upon the basic skills that our soldiers had learned at places like Camp Hughes. But there's no evidence at all of rifle grenade training at Hughes. But again, it's not a Ross rifle function. So that would be the first exposure they get
Yeah.
to rifle grenades before they go to the Western Front. My final stop is the military cemetery at Seaford. I'm surprised by the number of men buried here. Some died of wounds in nearby military hospitals, some were killed in training accidents, and some died of disease. A shocking number died here while waiting to go home after the war was over in the great influenza epidemic. Sadly, many of these graves are those of fellow Manitobans, including many who trained at Camp Hughes. The tragedy of it all is almost overwhelming for me, especially when we stop at one of the last graves. The 8th Battalion is Manitoba, and this man signed up in 1914. So he signed up right off the hop, went to Valcartier with the 8th Battalion, and died 3 weeks after the war was over.
Of influenza, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah, so he actually got through the whole thing.
yeah, made it through the whole war and died here in Seaford at the end. I'm so glad I came to England. I've learned that Camp Hughes was actually bigger than either Seaford or Shoreham. I've solved the mystery of the Camp Hughes rifle range. Justin and Luke have shown me that training was progressive as the soldiers got closer to the front, with more training opportunities and more advanced procedures and tactics being practiced in England. I wonder how many Manitobans swam here to cool off, or sat on this very beach and reflected on what they had left behind and what their futures held, perhaps even hearing the guns of the Western Front drifting across the channel. So many would never return, their journeys ending on the Western Front or in a hospital nestled in this lovely English seaside town. I hope they all had a chance to really enjoy the pubs and social life of Seaford while they were here. They still seem very present in this place. I feel like I've been very close to walking in their footsteps, although most vestiges of their time here are gone. After I get home, I'm able to spend a few days on site with the team. It really has been a great month of field work, but now it's time to pack it up. I'm at Brandon University to meet Sioko and see the artifacts that we've recovered now that they've been cleaned and catalogued. We have found over 600 artifacts. Some of my favorites are the General Service collar badges issued to the soldiers when they first signed up. These were worn until their unique battalion badges were authorized by military headquarters and produced by local jewelers. The thing that I really love about these is that these have been thrown away, not lost, because someone's taken the time to put the keeper back in. So these do tell a bit of a story about the soldiers, because when they get their unit badges, they're actually physically taking these off their uniforms, putting the keepers back in, and throwing them away. It's sort of a rite of passage that you've moved from being a recruit to a member of the 44th Battalion or the 222nd Battalion or whatever.
So we're too romantic, Mark.
Yeah. So you know what these are now?
Yes,
Okay.
I sent a
All right.
picture of what we were discussing. We thought maybe this was like a sweetheart
Right.
bit or from a tag day. And the provincial archaeologist burst that bubble and said, this is a tobacco tag.
Oh, okay.
So
All
this,
right.
and this is what they would clip on the edge of the container
Okay.
to keep it sealed. And we found another one too. This one has a little ring on it, but it does have the little.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, yeah, the same little clips.
Yeah.
Okay.
and this one, I guess you could also call a recent find because we were able to get it open.
Oh, okay, okay. So
So-
this is
So we didn't
Yeah.
know. We didn't want to force this out in the field.
Right.
So we brought it back to the lab, and if we can carefully lift this, I can hope I can get this off without breaking it. And
so there's still shoe polish.
still shoe
inside.
polish.
That's amazing.
So we found a few shoe polish tins. This is the only one with its contents.
Right. A startling find is a portion of an artillery fuse. We positively identify it as a 106 fuse by comparing it to a cutaway from the museum's ammunition reference collection. The fuse fragment has clearly been subjected to an explosive detonation. This leaves no doubt that high explosive was fired into the built-up area of Camp Hughes sometime after 1916, likely in the 1930s. Where there's one high explosive round fired, there will likely be many. What this means is there is a chance in our future investigations of us encountering unexploded high explosive rounds, which is a much greater magnitude of risk. And of course for treasure hunters, I mean, digging out there actually could kill people is what it really boils down to. And so it's important, and we'll be able to publish those results, and hopefully people will play it safe and won't just randomly dig where they might end up digging up a 32-pound high explosive projectile.
That would be unfortunate.
Sioko was right in assessing that the paper fragment we found was from a newspaper. In fact, we recovered most of a copy of the Winnipeg Evening Tribune from a Saturday in October of 1916. It will take years to clean, conserve, and study. Amazingly, it has already connected us with the stories of two men who passed through Camp Hughes in 1915. It likely would have been destroyed by a treasure hunter. Right.
This here, we have rum meeting at Grace Church.
Right.
And then...
Okay, and so, yeah, now this is, so the sentence is Leach was killed in a few days, there's a missing text and it says Popham made. So, you know, my supposition was that both these men were killed. And as it turns out, there's only one man with the last name, the surname of Leach, who's killed in the Canadian Army before 1917. And that is Lieutenant Hart Leach. And he is killed, and 10 days later, someone who I suspect was his friend, Lieutenant Clark Popham, was killed on the Somme in 1916. Both of those men enlisted in the 61st Battalion in Winnipeg on the 1st and 2nd of June 1915, trained at Camp Hughes, and went overseas. They were sent to separate units from the reinforcement camps in England, and then were killed, like I said, 10 days apart on the Somme. So amazing that we can connect with them by finding a little fragment of newspaper. And for me, it's the perfect symbol of how those camps worked. It is that constant cycle of new men coming in to be trained while the men who had been there the year before were fighting and dying at the front. It is that cycle of replenishing the troops at the front line to keep the army fighting. As we wrap up the field school, I've come to pay my respects to the soldiers in the Camp Hughes Cemetery. The graves of soldiers are such a powerful testament to the futility and the tragic cost of war. So many lives cut short. The fate of these 6 men was to stay at Camp Hughes for eternity, as silent reminders that once, long ago, tens of thousands of men marched here on their way to the Great War.